Welcome to Dog Training Bytes. The show where canine professionals share their key takeaways, big aha moments, and hardest lessons learned from working with dogs. I'm Mattison, certified dog trainer and behavior consultant, and dogs are my life. Every day I get to coach guardians and other trainers into a deeper understanding of canine behavior. But let's face it, sometimes dog training really bites. And that's okay, because when it does, we learn a lot. This podcast is all about sharing the lessons learned from experience, because the stories of when it got tough or when we made a mistake, that's when we learn the lessons worth learning. And it's time we share those with the world. I'll be talking to dog trainers and other pet professionals about times that working with dogs, well, bit. Not literally. Maybe literally. What's most important here on this show, what did they walk away with? What did they learn? How did it shape their approach today? Welcome to Dog Training Bytes, the show where pet professionals share personal lessons that you won't find in any textbook. Today, I get to speak with someone who is bringing incredibly valuable education to our industry, Michael Shikashio. Mike is a certified dog behavior consultant and founder of AggressiveDog.com. His focus is education for trainers worldwide on how to successfully work aggression cases. He also hosts an incredible podcast called The Bitey End of the Dog. And if you are interested in aggression cases within the world of dog training, you have a ton of content to go and listen to. Mike's list of accomplishments and features is a long one. 5-term president of the IAABC, APDT Member of the Year in 2020, featured in countless news outlets, including the New York Times and SiriusXM Radio, creator of the Aggression in Dogs Master Course, and creator of the annual Aggression in Dogs Conference, which I attended virtually last year. Hi, Mike. This is very exciting for me to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to speak with me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
So I don't actually know the answer to this. I'm genuinely curious. I probably could have dug and figured it out, but I didn't. Tell me about your dogs, the dog or dogs that are in your life right now.
Yeah, right now I have one dog, which is the
Solo.
least. Yeah, that is not a lot of dogs for me. And it's only because I travel so much right now. I have a lot of speaking engagements, so it wouldn't be fair for me, although I'm really itching to get another dog. But right now I have a Castagna. She's a Chilean street dog that my girlfriend brought up from Chile about 6 years ago. And she was rescued in a garage, like a shopping mall garage as a puppy, ran up to my girlfriend and was like, "You're mine." And Moira was like, "Yeah, okay." And she raised her
Wow.
as a puppy, and she flew her up here 6 years ago. And so yeah, now she's here with me, leaving her black hairs all over my house and all over our bed and everything. But
Yep.
that is my
Yeah.
one dog. And we have one cat too, a street cat named Renardo. Same kind of thing, found in a
Bernardo.
drainage ditch in Chile, and he latched onto Moira. And so I have one dog and one cat.
That is awesome. We have the one dog, one cat combo as well. Although I do have a foster who's been hanging around for the last 6 months or so, but that is awesome. Okay, Mike, I also don't know the story that you brought, so I'm flying a little bit blind, but I do trust us to land the thing.
Mhm.
So, what would you like to share with the dog people out there?
I think so. You were mentioning an experience that has really changed the way I approach life or training. And, I always go back to when I was fostering dogs. So just like you have a foster now. So I used
Yeah.
to foster dogs in my other home. I've had close to 100 foster dogs in and out of the
Wow.
home, as many as 8 dogs at one time. So
Oh my gosh.
really packed with,
Yeah.
lots of X pens and baby gates and stuff sometimes. And it was mostly labs and Dobermans and these, what I would say is like bigger dogs,
Yeah.
big block-headed labs that just come plowing through baby gates, turning them into splinters, like that kind of
Yep.
dog. And then one time though, I got this beagle. His name was Barney, which is a totally original name for a beagle, right? But Barney, I was at first, this is going back about 20 years ago. And I was just starting to learn how to train. So my first mentor was this military dog trainer, and he used a lot of heavy-handed methods, choke chains and prong collars. And that seemed to work for me for the labs and the Dobermans I was, fostering, because I was like, okay, we got to teach them how to walk nicely on a leash and things like that. So very basic training using those tools. But I tried to do that with Barney. And I remember the first day, I'm like, oh, this dog's pulling all over the place. He's trying to sniff. Got to just stop him
Trying to
from
sniff. Yep.
all around. What is he doing? doing? So I put a prong collar on him. I was like, all right, I know how to fix this. So I go out and we're walking just outside of my house too. And we're walking sunny day, beautiful day. He's out there like glorious sniffing time. And he goes and starts pulling. And I did what I learned at the time was to correct him. So I did a good pop on the leash, just like I would to one of the labs. And
Yeah.
he let out the most blood-curdling beagle scream,
Oh, yeah.
down on the
And that's a
beagle
whole
for me.
different noise.
Oh yeah. And my neighbor was outside, kind of looked at me like, gave me this look like, what are you doing? And it brought this epiphany to me that made me question, what am I doing here? What is the point of doing this? Do I actually need to not let him sniff, or should he be sniffing? Why is he pulling? What
Mm,
about his emotions? What about his feelings? Rather than just looking at that one behavior of pulling on leash is a bad thing, right? And
right. It made you get really curious.
it did. It brought out
Yeah.
this epiphany like, I've got to learn more. I've
Mm,
got to really start to dig into, much more about behavior and training because clearly I'm not doing something right. And that sparked my interest into behavior and really more and started to snowball into the aggression stuff that I do now. But it really got me looking at the inside of the dog, what's happening from an emotional level, what's happening from why they're doing the behaviors, not just the symptoms, right? What are the causes of their behaviors? And for a beagle, of course, one of the causes for pulling on leash is to smell. I mean,
right.
as human beings, have asked for beagles or other scent hounds to sniff and be really good at doing those things. So suddenly, this guy in Connecticut, is like, all right, now you got to stop doing what we've asked for, hundreds of generations of beagles to in breeding for you to do. Now I don't want you to do it. How silly of me to think of that. So it was a really good moment in terms of changing my training style, in terms of training how I viewed animals. It was a pivotal moment for sure.
Yeah, when you're thinking about, I mean, just being curious in general, how does that impact, I don't know the degree to which you do today, but how did that impact your client work and like your intake process and the questions and the types of questions and the categories of questions maybe that you would ask guardians as a part of that consultation or evaluation?
Yeah, so it went from, I was just scratching the surface of taking on clients at the time. So it was just starting out. And it went, usually you would just go and I wouldn't take any notes. I wouldn't ask about any background. Be like, hey, what's the issue? Okay,
What
so
do you
your
want to
dog's,
teach them? All right, let's
yeah,
do
well,
it.
your dog's jumping up on visitors. Okay, yeah, I can fix that. So whatever method. And then, but again, I wasn't looking at any of the underlying reasons for many of the dog's, what we would call as problem behaviors, but are really just behavior when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's just the dog, displaying a behavior based on what's motivating it to do that. And so I never dug into things like underlying pain or medical issues that can cause
Mhm.
aggression, or the breed specific behaviors, or environmental stressors, or other, existing negative associations the dog has that is causing fear or frustration, stress or anxiety. All of those things were missing. And so I started to learn more about behavior consulting and really learning about how to ask questions and then my interview and intake process. And I developed my own intake form, which was like 14 pages or something ridiculously long at first. So like,
Everything now.
yeah, so it would only take me like 3 hours to get to it. It was like this ridiculously long thing, but I didn't want to miss anything either. I kind of went,
Yeah.
that's just my style. I kind of go overkill approach with things at first and then pair them back. And so that's what I did over the years. I started to really just pair back, all the questions that
Yeah.
that I was
Yeah.
asking, because you really don't need to ask all of those
No.
questions.
No.
It depends on the case, which questions you ask. So that's how it
Agreed.
really shaped and adapted my intake process. But what really shaped and changed was my relating to people and practicing and learning empathy, just like I had to in that moment practice empathy for Barney, because he's
Mm.
telling
Hmm.
me, dude, what you're doing is not right. And I
Yeah.
recognized that. If I wasn't empathetic to that, I would have just kept doing what I'm doing, right? And ignored his scream, which would have been really bad. But it
Yeah.
also helped me adapt to what I'm doing with people, is like understanding that they have needs, they have their emotions, they have their life frustrations and stress and impacts that can impact their daily routine. And they might even get upset with me sometimes. And that's something I brought even further past dog training, is that, when you're having a conversation with somebody, when you're trying to navigate a difficult moment or context or conversation, it's start with empathy first, because you never know what
Yeah.
that person's going through that day or that week or that month or that life. And if we
Yeah.
don't recognize that, then we're going to miss being able to truly help that person or help ourselves or help the situation, whatever we're looking for as a reasonable positive outcome. is not going to happen until we start with empathy first, and then the
I
kindness
could
that
not
comes
agree
along with it.
more.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
in my past life in a corporate America, there was a program or a book that we had to take on conflict resolution. It was called Crucial Conversations. And
Great
there were
book.
a couple of, yeah, okay, cool. So there were a couple of things in there that leading with questions, right? Saying really,
Mhm.
really curious. And then I constantly refer back to seeking first to understand and then to be understood. Like that's what empathy is, right? It's like not it's not, okay, how can I frame this so they agree with me? It's like, no, you have to actually get curious, like seek to understand, which I think can be hard until you hear the concept framed in the right way in your brain where it clicks and you're like, oh, okay, it's really as simple as just seeking to understand or asking questions or something like that. But yeah, I think it can be hard, especially as a professional where we do see such a high volume of these cases to be able to stay curious in that way and come into every single consult like, no, this is completely brand new. Okay, I know that we're here for a resource guarding, but this is not the resource guarding case that I had last year or last week or yesterday. This is a totally different situation because there's so much in the dynamic for that dog and the people in that dog's life and in that dog's environment. Like you said, we have to learn all these different categories. And I wonder if, as you were sort of expanding your detective work, what was the one thing that you were surprised at how important it was that like you never would have thought of before?
The what happens when you're not there. So the answers you get from people, the interactions they have with their dog in front of you are often going to be much different than what happens when you're not there. And that's a crucial conversation, right? Because
It
like,
sure
what do you do
is.
to your dog when I'm not looking? And people aren't going to be admitting things, oh, I scream at my dog, I get frustrated, I take out the newspaper or a squirt bottle or do something, they don't usually admit that. And if we don't give
Mhm.
them a safe space to actually tell you those things, then we're not actually going to never solve their problem because you could be like, oh, yeah, they look great. They're teaching the dog how to sit. They're giving positive reinforcement. Everything looks great while you're there. But then when you're
Mhm.
not there, they're doing like a mixed bag of techniques and the dog's getting frustrated and confused and things are just not changing. And you're like, oh, what is it? I don't get it. What is it? If we don't uncover that, that is a problem because we cannot we have to make that change in the overall behavior program. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's crucial that there's the where that empathy comes in. We have to create that space where the client's going to be like, yeah, I can totally tell Mike anything because I trust him not to
Mhm.
criticize me, not to judge me. He just wants the best for me, my dog. So if we don't do that, that was a big epiphany as well. That's something I recognized later on, and it happens more than we realize, because
Yeah.
you have to
And
dig for it.
being able to connect with the human and like we can be great at modifying behavior in dogs, whatever. Until we can modify behavior in humans, it's not going to help these dogs long term. We know that now is that it's about coaching the humans and making the change that they need to make in their life. And at this point for me, all the clients that I work, we work daily and asynchronously. So I'm right in their phone, I'm right in their pocket, I'm right in their life. And that makes it I think there's a lot more accountability. There's a lot more transparency. You're going to get away with a lot less. Not that we're spying, but we want to make sure that things are being followed consistently. And when things aren't being followed consistently, that affects how we're going to approach things. So, is there anything from this apparently series of epiphanies that impacts what you're doing today? Because what you're doing today is a little bit different. You're at this level of training the trainers and educating people. So how does this sort of follow through? Where's the connection to what you're doing today?
That's a great question. I think for me, I've, especially just this year or last year, I should say, as my business has really expanded and grown, over the last few years, but even last year, it significantly grew and expanded. It's that I have to navigate a lot of relationships with different people. So
Yeah.
people that speak for me, people that come on my podcast, people that do webinars, people that work for me. I mean, there's all of these relationships you have to navigate. And with that, there's responsibilities because you have to support your team, you have to make their payroll, you have to further the industry, you have to ensure the ethics are sound. There's so many more responsibilities. And what can happen, and this is really advice for up and comers, people that are just getting recognized. They're, not brand new trainers, but let's say it's a trainer that's been around a few years and they want to expand more into speaking or doing other, teaching other trainers or, other, getting out there more than, working with clients. This is the lesson for them is that no matter what you do, you're never going to please everybody.
Mhm.
And the more you become known, the more people are going to reach out to you for something, for favors, for, platforming something, for supporting some cause. It could be a million different things. And you're going to get that. It's going to happen. There's no avoiding that. But
Yep.
with that comes disappointment when you can't support them, disappointment when you're not, supporting their cause as much as they want to, things that, can be rumors made up about you because, let's face it, everybody's, I'm no Kim Kardashian or, somebody at that level, but, or Will Smith, right? But those people do things that suddenly millions of people are talking poorly about them. So at some level, even if you have 1,000 followers, it could be just 1% of that. Now you're going to have 10
Yeah.
people talking poorly about you or criticizing. And that's something you have to get used to. But
Mhm.
then that can be discouraging because what happens is you start to see the bad in people, even though it's such a small percentage of people. It's just a numbers game. If you have 1 million followers, maybe you have 10,000 people talking poorly about you, but that is going to happen. And anybody that's listening now, be prepared for it. And if you're prepared for it, it'll remember you. And this is a life lesson for me was remember to recognize the good in people
Mhm.
because there's always something good about the person you're talking to. Everybody has a bad, and it's easy to catch that. I can be like, oh, yeah, this person did this badly. So now I'm never going to talk to them. Is that going to discount the 999 other things that they did were good versus that one bad thing? And so
Right.
that's an important concept for me to recognize because sometimes I get discouraged or I'll have a bad day with some criticisms. It's just always, there's always a good in person and in people
Yeah.
and recognize that is going to keep your relationships moving forward and and keep you as the person having to navigate all of this moving forward because
That's
it
the
can take you
important
back a
part.
step sometimes. I've had some ups and
Yeah.
downs for sure.
Yeah, I like what you said about really kind of separating who a person is versus what they might just say without thought on the internet. So
Yeah.
sometimes we do have to like in our minds compartmentalize the people from the internet trolls. Use that word if you have to. They're not real people. Block them. They don't get access to you anymore. And they're not allowed to take up space. They're not allowed to be negative in your space in that way. You can remove them from your world, but it's not about them as a person. They're not a bad person. That's just something that they put out on the internet and just let it go and move forward, like you said. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can decide. Sometimes you give the person the opportunity. They might say something. It depends what they say and how egregious it is and how it makes you feel. But sometimes I will afford the person the opportunity. Somebody might say something really nasty to me or make a comment, and I might respond and be like, "Hey, I'd like to know more about what you're saying." So without criticizing back, I do sometimes afford that opportunity. And then if, of course, they respond, in a negative way again, criticizing, and there's no openness for conversation, then
Yeah.
of course, yeah, then I end it there.
Yeah. No,
You
I
have to
agree.
decide, yeah. But you also have to decide how many Fs you have to give because there's a
It's
finite number
true.
of that too.
And
So,
there are a lot of people out there who don't agree with us who are going to bring their different opinions respectfully. And I'd
yeah.
rather pour my energy into those conversations. But I'm impressed that you're willing to give uh very, very quick second chances, Mike. That's very, very nice of you. Okay, so is there anything else that you'd like listeners to know about what you're doing right now, what you're working on, anything coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I always send people right to my website. It's aggressivedog.com. It's the easiest way to find out all of the stuff, conference, podcasts, webinars, articles, this, whatever I've got going. I've got a lot of in-person workshops happening next year or this year as well overseas. So if you want to find out more about aggression in dogs and learn more about aggression, helping dogs with aggression issues, just go to aggressivedog.com and you can find all the stuff there.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I see how much you're doing with the education and the accessibility of it. And that's something I'm obviously really passionate about as well. So you can connect with Mike on Instagram at Michael Shikashio, and you can find more information on his programs and all of his other work in the show notes. Thanks for joining us in the world of Dog Training Bites, where every challenge brings a lesson worth sinking our teeth into. See you next time. Dog Training Bytes was created, produced, and edited by Mattison Simpson. You can connect with me on Instagram at Dog Training Bytes, that's BYTES, and at Freed by Training. For information on today's guest and resources for help with your dog or dog training education, visit www.dogtrainingbytes.stream. Looking for more? Listen to my other show, Unpacked, a clinical dog training podcast co-hosted by Sailor Jerry the dog trainer and produced by Straight Up Dog Talk LLC.